My daughter-in-law didn't come to my son's funeral. By supper time, she'd posted a photo of herself on a beach in Aruba, a flute of champagne sweating in her hand, the trainer's bare arm wrapped around her waist, under a caption that read, "Finally free." I was still standing in the wet grass at Maple Hollow when my phone buzzed against my chest with a text from my son. The son I'd watched them lower into the ground 90 minutes before. Before I tell you what that text said, do me a favor and let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. And if you've ever had to hold yourself together in a room full of people who'd already written you off, hit that subscribe button. Because this story is for you. My name is Conrad Mercer. I'm 68 years old, and for 41 of those years I fix clocks for a living. People think that's a quaint little trade, an old man with a loop in his eye, but I'll tell you what a lifetime of clockwork teaches you. A clock can be wrong. It can run fast, run slow, stop dead at 3:14 and sit there for a century. But a clock cannot lie. Every problem inside it is a real physical thing. A worn pivot, a tired mainspring, a speck of grit in the escapement. You find the part that's binding, and you fix it. People are the opposite of clocks. People can look like they're keeping perfect time while the whole machine inside them is rotten. It took me 68 years and the worst week of my life to learn that. That afternoon, the rain came down on Hartwick the way it does in late October up here in Vermont. Not a storm, just a steady gray drizzle that gets into the marrow and stays. My son Sawyer was 39. He built a craft distillery out of a leaky barn and turned it into Bellwether, a name people drove 3 hours to see, and he did it the way he did everything, with too much heart and not enough suspicion. I stood at the lip of his grave with my hands folded behind my back, not because I was calm, but because I was afraid that if I let them go, I'd come apart at the seams right there in front of everybody. To my right was a folding chair with a little brass plate that said, "Family." It was meant for the widow. It sat there empty, the cushions soaking up rain, going dark and heavy, and I swear that empty chair said more than the minister did. The whole town noticed it. I heard them. 40 years of leaning over a workbench listening for the faintest tick a customer couldn't hear will sharpen a man's ears, and I caught every word. "Where is she?" one of them whispered. "A man in a good coat, one of Sawyer's investors." "Beach," somebody answered, low and ugly. "She's already got the lawyers lined up. 8 million in life insurance, plus the brand. That crying widow act only lasts till the check clears." I dug my fingernails into my own wrist behind my back and stared at the casket and said nothing, because I'd spent the last 3 days defending her. Every time I'd called my son's wife cold, he defended her right back. "She had a hard life, Dad. You don't see the side I see." So I gave her the benefit of the doubt one last time, standing there in the mud, and I hated myself for it later. Her mother came, stood at the back under an umbrella too big for one person, sunglasses on even though the sky was the color of a bruise. When the minister finished and folks started drifting toward their cars, muttering the same 5 words at me, I walked straight to her, my shoes pulled out of the grass with a wet sucking sound. She flinched when she saw me coming. That little flinch told me more than anything she said next. "Conrad," she said, voice climbing high and thin, "I'm so sorry. This is a tragedy." "Where is she?" I asked. I didn't raise my voice. I've got a voice like a file dragged over brass. I don't have to. "She collapsed this morning," the mother said. "Couldn't get out of bed. We had her admitted to a clinic over in Burlington. Exhaustion, the doctors say. Her heart just couldn't take it. No visitors. Absolute rest. She wanted so badly to be here, Conrad. You have to believe that." I wanted to believe it. God help me, I did, because the only other explanation was that my son had loved a monster, and I wasn't ready to carry that on top of everything else. "Which clinic?" I said. "I'll bring her flowers." And the mother said no. A half-second too fast, the way people do when the lie isn't finished cooking yet, and I nodded and said I understood and walked away. I'm not proud of that. I chose the easier wait. I sat in my truck, an old Chevy I'd driven since the second Clinton term, the kind of vehicle my son was forever trying to upgrade for me, and I let the rain hammer the roof. On the passenger seat was a wind-up tin robot my grandson had left there the last time they visited. Eli, 9 years old, all elbows and questions. The mother hadn't said a word about Eli. Where was the boy? Was he at this clinic too? Something about that cold little fact set my teeth on edge. That's when the phone buzzed. Then again. Then a third time, hard and fast against my breastbone. I figured it was another condolence from somebody who didn't know what to say, so I almost let it ring out. When I finally pulled it from my coat, the screen was lit up with one of those photo notifications. My son had set the whole thing up on my phone years ago, so I could see pictures of Eli, and I never did learn to work it right, but the alerts came through. It was her. Turquoise water, white sand, a glass with a salted rim. The trainer, Trent, 28. The one I'd warned Sawyer about a year ago because the man looked at her the way a coyote looks at a henhouse, pressed up against her, oiled and grinning. She had her head thrown back, laughing. And the caption, finally free. The timestamp said it had gone up an hour earlier, around the time we were filling in the grave. The air went out of me. The clinic, the heart that couldn't take it, the absolute rest, every word her mother said curled up and turned to ash. She wasn't sick, she wasn't grieving, she was celebrating. My boy was going under 6 feet of cold Vermont mud, and his wife was raising a glass to it from a beach. My hand started to shake, and then the phone buzzed a different way. Not a photo alert, a text. I looked at the sender, and my heart simply stopped doing its job for a second. Sawyer. I sat there blinking at it. I'd identified the body. The car had gone off Route 7 into the Otter Creek Gorge and burned, and I'd stood in a cold room and looked at what was left and signed the papers. Dead men don't text their fathers. My thumb was trembling so hard it took 3 tries to open it. Dad, get to the house, now. Don't tell anyone, not even her family. Set the grandfather clock to 4:17. You'll understand. I'm sorry. 4:17. That was the time he was born. He used to ask me when he was little and couldn't sleep to tell him the exact minute, and I'd say 4:17 in the morning, son, and the whole world smelled like snow. Nobody alive knew that but me. The phone slid out of my fingers and clattered onto the floor mat, and I sat there frozen while the rain came down like 1,000 fingers drumming on the roof. I picked it up. I read it again. A delayed message from a man planning his own death? A prank by a woman cruel enough to skip the funeral? Or something I didn't want to name? I put the truck in gear. Whatever was waiting at that house, I knew one thing for certain. The grieving old man who'd let her mother lie to his face was gone. The man who'd spent his life finding the one binding part inside a broken machine was driving now. The house sat up on the ridge above the distillery, all glass and black timber, a place my son had spent more money on than I made in 20 years of fixing clocks. I parked the truck 2 switchbacks down under a stand of bare maples and walked up in the rain, keeping to the tree line. There was a private patrol car that crawled these roads, the kind of expensive nonsense she'd insisted on, and I waited in the wet brush until its taillights washed around the bend before I crossed the lawn. The front door had no keyhole, just a slab of dark wood and a glowing panel. I pressed my thumb to it. Access denied, a little voice said. Polite as a bank teller. She'd scrubbed me out of the system. Same as she was scrubbing me out of everything. So I went to the side of the porch, to the thing I'd half forgotten my son had installed, an old brass-faced keypad he kept for me, the analog backup. Dad, because you don't trust a house you can't take apart. I keyed in the date he graduated, then the digits of his birthday. The panel went yellow, then green, and a synthesized version of my son's own voice said, "Welcome home, Dad," and the locks let go with a sound like a series of bolts dropping, and hearing him say it nearly put me on my knees. Override active, the voice went on, calm and even. The monitoring company will receive a check-in alert in 20 minutes. Move quickly. 20 minutes. I stepped inside and the door sucked shut and sealed behind me. The house didn't smell like my son. Sawyer always smelled like oak and grain and the sweet maple smoke off the distillery. This place reeked of bleach and lemon, the way a room smells when somebody's scrubbing something out of it. Why would a grieving widow order a deep clean the day after burying her husband? The mantel where he kept his photographs was bare. The fishing trip in the Adirondacks. Gone. His mother, my late wife. Gone. Even the wedding pictures. Gone. She wasn't just leaving him. She was erasing him from the world. I found the grandfather clock in the front hall, a beautiful old 8-day movement I'd given him the year Bellwether turned its first profit. I opened the long case door, reached up, and set the hands. 4. Then 17. The minute hand clicked home and something inside the case let go with a soft mechanical thunk, and a panel at the bottom of the case swung loose. Behind it, in the dark, was a small steel box and a memory card in a plastic sleeve, and a folded sheet of paper in my son's handwriting that just said, "Watch this first, then run." There was a tablet in the box. I'm no good with these things, but my son had thought of that too. When I lifted it, the screen woke on its own, and there was one file, named Dad. I pressed it. He looked terrible. My handsome, marathon-running son looked like something the cold had gotten to. His skin had gone a sick yellow gray, his eyes sunk back in his head, and his hands wouldn't stay still. "Hi, Dad," he said, and his voice was a dry rasp that took a layer off my heart. "If you're watching this, I'm gone, and the backup worked. I need you to listen, because I don't have a lot of time, and I keep losing the words." He coughed, a wet rattle that bent him over, and drank from a glass with a hand that shook. "She's poisoning me. Has been for months. The doctor I went to said it was a nerve thing, neuropathy. My feet burning, my hair coming out in the shower. The confusion. They're wrong." I looked it up. It's thallium, old rat poison, the kind they banned before I was born. She's been putting it in my morning coffee. Sweet, no taste, and it just shuts the body down piece by piece. He looked up at the camera, and his eyes were the only sharp thing left in his face. "I know how that sounds, Dad, but I'm an engineer at heart, same as you. I tested it. I'm sure." I stood there in that cold hall with my hand pressed over my mouth. Why didn't I run? Why didn't I call the sheriff? Because she's got leverage. He shut his eyes. 6 months ago she had cameras put in. Then she had somebody build videos, fake ones, the AI kind. Good enough that you can't tell. Me hitting her. Me doing things that make you sick. She said if I left, she'd send them to the press and to my distributors. Bellwether's got 40 employees, Dad. 40 families. It'd be over in a week. He took a breath that didn't seem to reach the bottom. "But that's not why I stayed quiet. She said if I went to the law, she'd hang it on you too. Said she'd forged emails on your old shop computer, made it look like you knew about the abuse and covered for me. Said she'd see you die in a cell labeled as the man who raised a monster." I gripped the edge of the case so hard the wood bit my palm. "So I made a choice. I stopped letting them treat me. I'd rather go out clean than let her burn your name to do it." His voice was fading now. "But I didn't go quiet. Everything's on the card. The wire transfers to the man who built the fakes. The original files before they doctored them. Her on the phone with Trent, talking about the dose. Take it to Bernie Aldis, you know where he lives. Don't go to the county sheriff, Dad. She owns him. Pell, the doctor, he's hers too. You go to the FBI field office in Burlington, you hear me? Federal." He leaned in, and the last of him came out in a whisper. "Take Eli. He's safe with your sister in Rutland. I sent him there last week, she knows. Don't let her near my boy. And don't let her win. Burn it all down before you let her win. Burn it all down before you let her win. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't be the one to bury you instead." The screen went dark and gave me back my own reflection, a wet old man with tears running into his gray beard. I cried. I won't pretend I didn't. I cried for the months he'd swallowed that poison alone to keep my name clean, the noble, stubborn fool. And then the crying just stopped. It didn't dry up. It froze. I slipped the card and the steel box into the inside pocket of my coat, against my heart, and I felt the weight of it settle there like a held breath. I'd missed something, though. Standing there grieving, I hadn't heard the second car come up the drive. The front door didn't unlock. It came off its hinges. A brute hit it once, twice, and on the third it tore loose and a man filled the doorway. Trent, soaked through, a tire iron hanging from his fist. So much for Aruba. Either he'd flown back ahead of her or he'd never gone. The photo could have been staged a day early. He stood there, dripping, scanning the dark, and behind him I heard her voice come crackling out of his phone on speaker, tinny and far away and unmistakable. "Is the old man there? Find what he took. I'm 3 hours out. The jet's fueling now. Do not let him leave with anything. 3 hours out. Good." That, at least, was an honest distance. She wasn't a ghost. She was a woman in a Caribbean airport. And she just told me exactly how much time her own greed had bought me. I didn't have 3 hours, though. I had Trent. I stepped back into the dark of the hall and went still. The way you go still when you're trying to hear a tick under a tick. He came in slow, the tire iron tapping the wall as he swept the rooms. I know you're here, old man, he said. Saw the truck up the road. I had a wall of bookshelves at my back and the open clock case beside me, and I reached into it, quiet as I could, and lifted out the old brass clock weight that drives the strike train 8 pounds of solid cylinder on a hook. I unhooked it and wrapped my fist around the cable. He came around the corner with the tire iron up. I let him take one more step into the patch of floor where the security pad's little blue glow would put his shadow on the wall ahead of him, so I'd see the swing before it came. He swung. I ducked under it. My knees screamed, both of them are replacements, and I brought that 8-pound weight up into the side of his knee with everything 40 years of cranking mainsprings had left in my arm. Something gave. He howled and folded, and the tire iron rang off the floor, and before he could get a hand on it, I hooked the weight cable around his ankle and yanked his other leg out from under him. He went down hard on the stone floor, then I put my whole body on the tire iron and slid it across the room into the dark. He was bigger than me and 20 years younger, and he'd be up in a minute. I didn't have a minute to spare. I grabbed the steel box, left the tablet, and I ran, not fast, an old man's heavy jog, down the back hall toward the mudroom where I knew there was a door. Behind me he was already dragging himself up, swearing, and then his phone, still on the floor, lit the ceiling and her voice came out of it again, climbing into a shriek. What's happening? Trent? Trent! 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 I hit the mudroom door, shouldered it open into the rain, and went out across the wet lawn toward the tree line, and I did not look back. My old friend, Bernie Aldous, answered his door at 1 a.m. in a bathrobe with a fireplace poker in his hand, took one look at me, torn coat, bloody knuckles, mud to the knees, and pulled me inside without a single question. He'd been my son's lawyer and mine for 30 years, and he was the only man left I trusted. I put the steel box on his kitchen table and told him everything. And then I sat there shaking while he ran the card on his laptop and went, one file at a time, white as a sheet. It's monstrous, he said finally, taking off his glasses. Conrad, this is the most monstrous thing I've ever seen. Then we've got her, I said. We go to the FBI tonight. He shook his head slow and the look on his face dropped my stomach to the floor. We will. But listen to me, because I've watched this go wrong 100 times. A dying man's video is powerful, and it's also exactly what a defense lawyer eats for breakfast. They'll say the thallium made him delusional and paranoid. And the cruel part is, thallium actually does cause paranoia, so the symptom proves their story. The deepfakes? Roleplay, they'll say? The phone calls with Trent? Hearsay, unless we caught it cold and clean. And the second she hears we're moving, she triggers the thing she's already built against you. Which is what? I said. He turned the laptop toward me. There was a draft on the screen. A petition. A doctor's letter, signed by a Dr. Pell, attesting to my rapid cognitive decline. Dates of imaginary appointments going back 4 months. A conservatorship, Conrad. She's going to have a judge declare you incompetent. Senyo. Once that order's signed, you can't sign a check, can't hire a lawyer, can't testify. Legally, you'd be a child. She'd take power of attorney, liquidate your pension, sell your shop, and she put you in a memory care facility out past the marshes, the cheap one. And you'd sit there while she sold off everything Sawyer built and married a third husband. It's legal. It's clean. And it's almost finished. I sat with that. The one thing I'd feared more than dying, losing my own mind, my own name, my own say. She'd found it and built a machine around it. So she wins, I said. Not yet. Bernie was clicking again, faster now, leaning into the screen. Your son was smarter than both of us. Look, there's a second entity here. A trust. Off the public books. He put the trademark on the maple cask process in it, the distribution rights, the cash he'd pulled out before he died. It's worth more than the insurance and the brand combined, and she has no idea it exists. He looked up at me. And he made you the sole trustee. 3 days before he died. Conrad, she's fighting for the house. The real fortune's in a vault, and the only key is you. Then we take it and leave her nothing, I said. That's not enough, Bernie said, and his voice went hard and quiet. Take the money, and she still walks. She still poisoned your boy. We need her to fall. We need her to say it out loud, on tape, somewhere she can't squirm out of. And to get that, He tapped the table. We have to let her think she already won. So I called her. The next morning, after Bernie and I had sat up the whole night building it, I sat in his study and dialed the number and made myself into the thing she wanted me to be. I let my voice shake. Easy enough. It was shaking anyway. I told her there'd been men in the house, men coming out at the walls, that I'd gotten frightened and run, and now I was so tired, so terribly tired, that the numbers on a page danced when I looked at them. That she was right about me. That I couldn't carry any of it anymore. I told her I wanted to sign it all over. I wanted to feed the birds and stop thinking. And I heard it. I heard the greed inflate her like a bellows, heard her go from sharp to syrup sweet in the space of a breath. Oh, Dad, you're making the right choice. Sawyer would want me to carry this. And then I gave her the hook. Because I know what vanity sounds like. The way I know what a worn pivot sounds like. I told her I didn't want to sign in some lawyer's back office. I wanted to do it properly. A reception, the press, the investors, the distributors all watching the old patriarch hand over the keys with his blessing. So nobody could ever question her right to it. I wanted to give a little speech. I wanted to tell the world I was proud of her. She went quiet, calculating. Then I heard her smile come down the line. A woman like that can resist money in her hand, but she cannot resist a crowd watching her receive it. That's beautiful, Dad, she said. It's good for the brand, too. Stability. She'd fly back that night. The reception would be the next afternoon at the Hartwick Grand downtown in the ballroom. She'd handle the guest list. Just clean yourself up, she said. You sound a mess. And she hung up to go pick out a dress. Bernie clipped a little transmitter inside the lapel of the gray suit my son had bought me for his wedding. You're a terrible actor, Conrad, he said. So don't act, just be the tired old man. Let her underestimate you one last time. It'll be the last clean look she ever gets at you. The ballroom of the Hartwick Grand was all chandeliers and white lilies, and she'd turned my son's memorial into the social event of the season. A string trio played in the corner. Waiters moved through the crowd of investors and distributors, and town money with trays of Bellwether's own bourbon, which I thought was a special kind of obscene. Trent stood near the little stage in a suit a size too small, his knee in a brace I'd given him, playing security and scanning the room. He didn't look at me twice. To him, I was already handled. She stood at the podium in a black dress that managed to be both modest and an advertisement. Friends, she said, and her voice trembled on cue, my father-in-law has been through more than any man should bear. The grief it's been so hard on his mind. He's decided he needs peace, and he's asked me to carry the family forward. She put out a hand toward me. Please, help me welcome Conrad. I came down the center of that room, leaning hard on a cane, eyes on the carpet, letting my shoulders cave, and I heard the whispers wash over me. Poor man, look at him. They say he's lost it. Good, let them say it. A clock that everyone's decided is broken gets left alone on the shelf, and the thing nobody watches is the thing nobody guards. She wrapped me in a hug for the cameras that felt like a snake taking its first wrap. Just sign and smile, Dad, she breathed in my ear. There was a little antique table on the stage with a stack of blue folders and a gold pen, and behind it the big screen showed a black and white photo of my son, smiling, alive. I stepped to the microphone. My hands shook, and I let them. Before I signed, I rasped, I'd like to show you all one last picture of my boy. And I lifted my phone and fumbled the cable into the podium port while her smile pulled tight at the corners. Dad, the pen's right there, she said. Low. Just one picture, I said, the pathetic old man, and Trent started to move, dragging his braced leg, and I jammed the connector home. Bernie was in the front row with a laptop on his knees, and he was faster than their whole system. The black and white photo blinked out, and 10 feet tall on the wall behind her bloomed turquoise water, white sand, a salted glass, and Trent's oiled arm around her waist, with the timestamp from the afternoon we buried Sawyer burning in the corner, and the caption underneath in letters a foot high. Finally free. The room sucked in its breath all at once. She turned to stone. And before she could move, I tapped the screen again, and her own voice came roaring out of the ballroom speakers, crystal clear. The recording off my son's card. Keep it slow. In the morning coffee, he can't taste it. By winter, the doctors will just call it his nerves. Then Trent's voice lazy and amused. And the old man, and hers again, cold as the gorge that killed my boy. The conservatorship's nearly through. We put him away and sell it all out from under him. Nobody questions a saddled widow taking care of her senile father. The crowd came up out of their chairs. Cameras flashed. "That's fake," she screamed. "That's AI. He's insane. It's not real." But I had one more thing, and I played it. The screen filled with my son's gray, ruined face, and the room went so quiet you could hear the chandeliers hum. "Hi, Dad," he said. "If you're watching this, she killed me." And 40 distributors and a dozen reporters and the whole moneyed crowd of Hartwick heard my boy name his own murderer. Trent went for something inside his jacket, not a phone. I saw the metal. "Good!" I shouted, and I dropped the cane, because the cane Bernie had handed me that morning was solid hickory with lead. Poured in the handle, a clockmaker's idea of a weapon, and as Trent's hand cleared his coat, I brought it down across his wrist with everything I had. The crack was bone. The pistol spun across the stage and into the orchestra pit, and 3 men in windbreakers that said FBI came through the side doors before he hit the floor, because Bernie had been streaming the whole feed to the field office in Burlington since the moment I plugged in the cable. They put her in cuffs center stage in front of every camera in the county. She didn't beg. She thrashed and screamed that I was a crazy old man, that I'd lost everything too, that I'd die alone in an empty house just like my son did. They paused to get a grip on her, and I held up one hand, and the agents waited, and I leaned in close so she'd have my voice to keep her company every night for the rest of her life. "I lost my son," I told her, quiet as a movement winding down. "That's a thing that won't ever keep right time again. But I didn't lose my name, and I didn't sell my soul for a beach in Aruba. You lost your freedom. You lost the boy. And you lost the game. You thought you were the only one playing." I straightened up and nodded to the agents, and they walked her out with her heels dragging, screaming all the way to the car. I picked up the gold pen off the little table. I uncapped it, and I drew one thick black line straight through every page of her paperwork, and I let it drop. Then I turned my back on all of it and walked out into a gray Vermont afternoon where, for once, the rain had finally stopped. The trials took the better part of a year. The thallium showed up in my son's tissue when they exhumed him, which turned a dying man's video into hard, federal, undeniable fact. Trent took a deal and gave them everything. Dr. Pell lost his license and his freedom. The sheriff resigned. I sat in the front row for the sentencing in my son's wedding suit, and when the judge read out the decades, I didn't feel joy. I felt a great steel tension I'd carried since the cemetery finally let go, the way a mainspring lets go when you finally find the grit that's been binding it. I drove out to Maple Hollow that evening and stood over my boy with my hat in my hands. "It's done, Sawyer," I told him. The clock kept time. I read the message. "I'm sorry it took me a lifetime to learn that the people who look like they're running right are sometimes the ones rotted all the way through." The wind came up off the ridge and moved the bare maples, and for the first time since I buried him, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like a held breath finally let out. A year on now, and there's a long room down on Mill Street with my son's name over the door. The Bellwether Workshop, I called it, though it's got nothing to do with whiskey. It's a place for kids who fell through the cracks. Foster kids, kids who lost their folks, kids the system shuffles around like they're spare parts. We teach them to fix things. Clocks, mostly, because that's what I know. But really, we're teaching them that a broken thing isn't a worthless thing. That you don't throw out the machine. You find the one part that's binding, and you set it right. My grandson comes every day after school. Eli is 10 now, all elbows and questions still, and he sat with me at the bench last week with a stopped pocket watch his great-grandfather had owned, working a tiny screwdriver, his tongue between his teeth. He got the case open and frowned at the dead movement inside. "It's stuck, Grandpa," he said. "It's junk." "It's not junk," I told him. "It just stopped. Everything that stops has a reason, and the reason's always smaller than you think." I leaned in and showed him the speck of old, hardened oil binding the balance wheel, no bigger than a grain of sand. We cleaned it. We gave it the lightest touch of fresh oil, and I handed it back, and he wound it, and we both went still and waited. And it ticked. Faint and steady and alive, this old heart that had sat dead for 50 years, ticking away in my grandson's hands. He looked up at me with his father's eyes and grinned like the sun coming over the ridge. "It works," he whispered. "It worked because we didn't give up on it," I said. "That's the whole trick, Eli. People and clocks, both. You don't throw them out. You find what's binding, and you carry the weight, and you keep them running." He leaned into my side, the watch ticking between us, and I held my boy's boy close and thought that a man can lose the thing he loves most in this world and still somehow be handed a reason to keep good time. I'd buried a son, but in standing up for him, I'd found a whole room full of kids who needed somebody to believe they were worth fixing, and a grandson who would grow up knowing exactly what his father was and exactly what he wasn't. If you've ever had to rebuild after somebody you trusted took a hammer to your life, do this old clockmaker a favor and let me know in the comments what kept you ticking through the worst of it. I read every one. Until next time, find what's binding, carry the weight, and keep good time. For 41 years, I told people a clock can't lie. Every fault inside one is a real physical thing you can find if you're patient enough. A worn pivot, a speck of grit, a tired spring. What I never let myself see was that the woman who poured my son's coffee every morning could keep perfect time on the outside while she was rotting the machine from within. Sawyer didn't die because he was weak. He died because he was good, and he trusted the way good men trust. And trust without a clear pair of eyes behind it is just a door left unlocked. That's the first thing I'd hand to anybody listening tonight. Love your people with your whole heart, but never stop looking. Kindness and clear sight aren't enemies. The ones who lose everything are usually the ones who decided that watching closely was somehow a betrayal of love. It isn't. It's the truest part of it. The reason she nearly won wasn't that she was strong. It was that she'd done her homework and I hadn't. She'd built the conservatorship papers, bought the doctor, studied exactly where an old man cracks. I only beat her because Sawyer was smarter still. He didn't just feel afraid, he tested, he recorded, he hid the truth where only I could reach it. That taught me something I wish I'd known at 30. Feelings tell you something's wrong, but they don't win the fight. You win by thinking it through cold, by gathering what's real, by refusing to act until you understand the whole mechanism. Rage alone would have gotten me committed. It was patience and the clear head that put her in handcuffs. But none of the thinking would have mattered if I'd quit. There was a moment on that stone floor, with the trainer dragging himself up and my knees screaming, when every honest part of me wanted to lie down and let the dark have me. I was 68 and tired and alone. What carried me out that door wasn't courage in some movie sense. It was the plain refusal to stop while my son's voice was still in my pocket asking me to finish. That stubbornness, the willingness to take one more step when your body and your grief are both telling you to fold, is the thing nobody can give you and nobody can take. You build it the way you build anything worth keeping, one hard choice at a time. So if your life ever gets taken apart by someone you trusted, hear this from an old clockmaker who learned it the slow way. Keep your conscience clean, because in the end, it's the only thing they can't forge. Keep your mind sharp and your evidence real, because that's what stands up when the lies fall down. And keep going, even when going feels impossible, because the people who hurt you are betting everything on you giving up. Conrad Mercer almost gave up. I'm glad I didn't. The watch on Eli's bench is ticking again, and so am I.